So let's go back to this idea of if you're going to do a job analysis and you have to collect data, and it, again, needs to be quality, reliable data, there are 5 kind of specific sources or methods, I should say, methods for collecting data. Job performance is the first one. So what does this mean? It means as a job analyst, you would actually perform the job that you're studying. So if I wanted to figure out what it takes to be, making the cupcakes, I would actually have to spend some time performing the job of the cupcake maker. And so that's what it would help. So going through the actual job performance helps me understand what's involved in the work and what it demands. If you ever watch Undercover Boss, that's the kind of thing. They're going in to actually perform the job to better understand the job. A second method for data collection is observation. And this is where an analyst would actually watch people doing the work. So they're not performing it, but they're standing back and observing them, and that's the way you'd understand the job. Another way to data collect around job analysis is through interviews. So now you're sitting down with the workers and relying on their description of what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. Another method of data collection is looking at what's called critical incidents. So with this method, you're trying to kind of identify incidents where someone is really effective in their role or really ineffective. So, it might involve those outstanding moments where somebody really did something well or really did something poorly. And so as you compile these reports together, the idea is that you get a better sense of those job specifications and the job description. And then the last one is questionnaires. So with this one, we think about this being less expensive, faster in some cases than the other methods. But with questionnaires, again, you just hand out a questionnaire to workers and ask them to individually rate the tasks that they do, the behaviors they perform. And again, it would ask questions like, how frequently do you do something? How hard does it feel? How easy does it feel? And how important do you think it is? So there are advantages and disadvantages to all these different methods of collection. A lot of times if you're, designing a job analysis, you're going to think about how much time, how much money do I have? What are the things that are most important here? We're going to look at this chart that kind of helps connect this process to understand kind of workflow and where things move. So if we think about, you've decided your sources of data. So are you as a job analysis going to be the primary source of data? Are you going to rely on employees? Are you going to rely on supervisors? What methods of data collection are you going to use? All of those inputs then create the job data that you're collecting. So again, what we're looking for through this process is a better understanding of what are the tasks people perform, what kind of skills are required, what sort of duties are they performing, what kind of equipment are they using, really good data that explains the job. And the 2 primary outcomes then are your job description and your job specification. And again, the job description describes the work that people are performing. The job specification describes what's required of the worker. So a worker needs to have a particular set of skills. A worker needs to have a specific physical ability. And then again, that's where that connects back to all those different HR functions that we talked about. So some things to be aware of or issues that come out of job description is that if you don't have good job descriptions, they're poorly written, they provide little guidance to the job holder. So for a lot of employees, the job description sets the standard to say, this is what your expectations are of me as an organization. And if you don't have that right, that can create issues. The other thing that comes up problem with job description is that they're not always updated. So this takes a lot of time and money and energy to keep on top of this process. Job analysis tends to be one of the things that organizations put on the back burner. There are legal compliance issues if you don't have good job descriptions. So if your job descriptions aren't really related to job success or what's involved in a job, and you're making poor hiring decisions, you might be discriminating against people. If you're holding people to performance standards that don't really connect to the job, again, there are these legal compliance issues that come up, especially with things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment here. But again, there are a lot of reasons why job descriptions are important. So here are some tips for writing clear and specific job descriptions. This is a link to some sources that might help you understand jobs. So the Occupational Outlook Handbook is really going to set a standard for saying, in a typical situation, this is what a tax accountant job would look like, or this is what an HR assistant job would look like. And these can be really great starting points for organizations, especially in the early stages of job design, and then also comparing where you're at with other organizations. So kind of two things that we're going to wrap up with here is, again, making that connection why job analysis is so important in terms of legal compliance. So really the key here is to understand that when you're making hiring decisions or you're making kind of performance management decisions, so somebody might be in a disciplinary process or something, we need to know that you're connecting it to something concrete related to the job. And so if you have a good job description, you can say that the job description, again, kind of sets that standard for your employees. So the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that job duties and responsibilities be essential functions for job success. So there are some things within a role that are essential. And there are other things that are kind of nice to have, like, oh, it's great you do that, but that's not your primary role or your primary function here in the organization. So a really good job description makes that distinction. It says if we're hiring a receptionist, an essential function might be welcoming visitors or answering phones. In other words, that's one of the primary reasons this person or this role exists within the organization. Now, maybe on a monthly basis, the receptionist has been accountable for ordering someone lunch, but they don't do that regularly. That probably wouldn't be considered an essential function of the job. And if you choose not to hire someone because maybe they have a disability that doesn't make them capable of doing that function, that's where you legally get into trouble. So again, kind of knowing that connection is an important component here as we start to think about job analysis and how you're using job descriptions. So the essential functions should, in best practice, be identified as part of the job description. And here's some criteria to say, how do you identify if a job function is essential or not? One way to think about it is, could the position exist? Does the position exist to perform this function? So it's the reason you have the job is related to an essential function. Are there a limited number of employees available to perform that function? So another kind of standard we think about is there somebody else within the organization that could easily do this work? If not, it's probably an essential function. So this is just, again, kind of some key ideas that I wanted to highlight specific to job analysis, job design, and job requirements.